This week on To the Contrary.
First, the March for Life, changing policies on reproductive health after the historic Women's March. Next, the faces of the Trump cabinet. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, women's health and reproductive rights. Late this week, opponents to abortion rights gathered in Washington for the March for Life. Buses came from across the country filled with students and pro-life activists who feel energized by their new allies in the White House, President Trump and Vice President Pence, who spoke to the crowd. Senior advisor to President Trump, Kellyanne Conway, was the headliner, rallying the crowd dedicated to overturning Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court ruling that legalized abortion in the early 1970s. Also in the crowd, advocates who wanted to make the point that being pro-life doesn't stop at birth. Earlier this week, President Trump signed an executive order reinstating the global gag rule. The gag rule, also known as the Mexico City policy, bars federal funding for foreign organizations that perform abortions or even mentions them as an option to women. Critics claim the loss of U.S. aid will actually increase unintended pregnancies, unsafe abortions, maternal and newborn deaths, as well as reverse progress that's been made fighting HIV. Trump signed the order in front of a group of 7 white men 2 days after millions of women marched in Washington, other American cities, and around the world. That with a call for gender equality and comprehensive reproductive rights. Speakers and activists are calling on marchers to continue the resistance and to start by calling their senators and representatives to insist they continue funding Planned Parenthood.
So, Anushay Hossain, has President Trump now launched his own war on women?
I don't think he's launched his own war on women. I think he's just continuing the one that the Republican Party launched a few years ago.
No war on women. In fact, Ivanka is going to be our warrior for women.
Yes, I think he has, along with his cabinet members and his vice presidential pick. Donald Trump likes to play the game. Let's follow the leader wherever he may go.
I'd say just the opposite. I'd say there's a swath of women who've declared war on Donald Trump rather than the other way around.
Now, how can you say that, given that he's got a cabinet that's more white and more male than anyone since President Reagan 35 years ago, that there is a majority probably of people in that cabinet who believe in personhood? That means individual rights under civil rights laws for fetuses and zygotes. How do you say that's not a war on women?
Well, I'm talking about the opposite. I'm saying that there are women that came into the city and came across the country to protest Donald Trump, to focus on that agenda and not on the fact that there are probably a whole swath of issues that women could come together on rather than dividing us. And I think that's part of this. Again, our president, not president-elect, our president, obviously has engaged in having women on the cabinet, which is great. I'm more focused on the policies he's going to put forward and what that means for women across the country.
I think women are definitely going to be fighting back, and I think the March for Women last weekend made that very clear. But it's also very clear, as we saw when Donald Trump was, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that image of Donald Trump reinstating the global gag rule with 7 white men surrounding him. Yes, women are going to fight back, but he's also going to be attacking us consistently.
No. No, in fact, I think you're going to see a lot of things come out of this administration women are going to be very pleased about. And also in terms of the personhood, not a majority of the cabinet. I would say there are probably 2 or 3 members.
I've seen surveys done that. A majority. There are very few who are not.
I would love to see that.
Is, DeVos is,
right.
The list goes on.
There's about 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 that are really advocates on that. Most are not. Most are not even engaged on this issue.
The vice president spoke at the march.
It's not a signature issue for Trump at all. It is for Pence.
So I was in Ethiopia when the last global gag rule was going on, and the effect is devastating on women around the world, and we look stupid. You have women.
But how stupid do we look, though, in your estimation, now that Holland, a much smaller country, has stepped in and said where the U.S. has stopped providing funds, we'll guarantee it to every NGO, and I think it was about $500 million worth of funds. I mean, what does that make us look like in international eyes?
Yeah, we look stupid and we look anti-women, and it is anti-women when you make a woman who is HIV positive that she got from her husband go to one clinic and then make her walk 7 miles in Ethiopia to get her birth control because the U.S. won't fund birth control. This is not about we won't fund abortions in other countries. This is we won't fund birth control for women in other countries.
That is a really, really important point. I worked on the global gag rule and lobbied against it, making sure that the U.S. it stops being such a partisan policy and such a partisan football for over a decade with the Feminist Majority Foundation. And I think people need to, first of all, understand that the domestic politics around abortion have spilt onto the international arena, and the global gag rule is much more than about just abortion. I mean, any organization that works on abortion or advocates abortion loses their U.S. technical and financial assistance. And it would be completely unconstitutional in the U.S. So, for example, in Bangladesh, a lot of these clinics that are closed are the only clinics that are in these villages. So if I worked at a clinic and you came to me and I knew that an abortion would even be a life-saving service for you, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't even pass you a pamphlet in risk of losing all my funding.
And if I might shock them, I have to agree with what you're saying. It's not our finest way of dealing with this issue at all. And I would actually say to Pence and Kellyanne and others in the administration that are very hardcore on the choice issue. That's not his signature issue either.
But he's certainly not a friend.
But the point is that is not the way you reduce abortion internationally. There are better ways to do it, and I've advocated for years that we have common ground discussions in our party and between parties as to things that are really effective, and I don't think the gag rule is the best way to go.
Also, the U.S. already has the Helms Amendment, so no U.S. government funds can be used for abortion. So I don't understand why we have to keep on. I mean, it's completely, exactly.
I think it's a shocker, but I think for once all four of us agree that the global gag rule is not the greatest thing on the planet in terms of what our goal is and how we're viewed on the national arena.
And as a leader in global health.
As an advisor to the transition team, how do you and one who founded Republicans for Choice, I don't get it how you square.
You advocate, you push for common ground. I have allies that believe that is the way to go in the future. I have great hopes, as I've said before here, that Ivanka is going to be a real champion for women. There are other ways to address other avenues in, and we'll be working it. I think you can find ways that both sides can agree on the best methods to actually achieve the end goal of reducing abortion, which is good for women and good for children.
And I'm glad you have faith in Ivanka, who we did not elect.
Right.
But, I would like to point out that the gag rule went in under President Bush, and Laura Bush was actually pro-choice, and her husband did not change, and that gag rule went in. So that doesn't give me a lot of faith.
And mad respect to Ivanka, patron saint of our hope. But come on, at the end of the day, she is used as a PR move more than anything to smooth out her
Absolutely not.
Let's move on to the Women's March of last weekend. How are they going to harness that energy, if at all, and move forward?
Well, first of all, I want to say it was great. I loved being there. And I talked to a lot of women and actually got together with a women's group several days afterwards to talk about how we're going to network, how we're going to keep these connections going, and things like how we're going to get money to women for startup companies, all kinds of ways to empower women. And one of the things that I talked to a lot of women about who were enthusiastic was, this is great, but you got to show up on the day of the election. It's great to be upset now. It's great to show up. It's wonderful, but we have to show up.
Yeah, but are you telling me that the 3 million women around the world, except the ones who live in other countries, but however many it was in the U.S., that those women who showed up that march, there were among them many women who didn't vote on election?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm talking about getting out the vote. those women and that energy that was there, those are the ones we stay connected to. Those are the ones that reach out and bring other women to the polls.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like every single person that came out at the march is going to be become politically active, but at the same time, a lot of progressive groups and women's groups the following day held trainings, the Center for American Progress, Emily's List, and I think...
Trainings for what? Tell me, what are they
Trainings for what the next steps are. The United States of Women also has a lot of
Emily's
training.
List did a training on, do you want to run? This is how you run.
And also, we have to look at the organizers of the march. I mean, people like Linda Sarsour and Gloria Steinem aren't going to be like, great pink hats, ladies, now let's go home. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, clearly.
Is it going to, that march is not going to affect the Trump administration?
No, it's not, because also they hurt their cause with some of their...
Except to get him very upset over his signature issue, which is size matters.
Crowd numbers.
Right, and he was impressed by that. And as I told you in advance of the march, the word went out to have no counter-protests, to let the women have their say, to be respectful, to watch and listen, which they did do. He got part of the message, which is he needs to pay more attention to women, and he will. But he also...
Don't you think he'll be held... I mean, the people who are running the transition, selecting the cabinet members, are Pence and Bannon. And they don't seem to...
No, actually, they have some influence, but there are other players on that.
Who are the other ones who are pro-women?
Well, transition's gone, so it's after the fact. But I do want to make the point that they hurt their cause with Madonna and Ashley Judd getting up there and being so foul-mouthed and so violent. That actually turned a lot of people off. And people who were not at the march, but people sitting back in their homes, I've heard from saying, I thought it was a good idea until I heard these people. That being played again and again, I think, has dramatically hurt them. And whether or not it was such a confusion of issues, and there really wasn't a focus. Reproductive rights was part of it, climate change was part of it, other things were part of it. So it's going to be very hard for them to turn this into the Tea Party of the left. They're not focused.
Yeah, I think a movement is more than one day and one moment. I think everyone knows that a grassroots effort is going to hopefully perpetuate itself over time. We hope that the president is listening and engaging, but I hope that he's engaging on more than just a dialogue about choice. I think there are a lot of other issues that impact women across this country that I hope that we'll see some momentum on. And some of this is also, to Deborah's point, about getting women to run for office. If you want to get involved, you can get involved in your local organizations, but you can also actually run for office and be a part of the policy making when the time comes. And I feel like there are more women that were motivated by last weekend to inspire them to get involved in the process and to have a voice larger than what they had.
And what about 2016? What about, 2018? 2016 is behind us. 2018, is there organizing not to just get women to run for office, but to also get candidates in the Senate ready in Senate states where Republican incumbents are up, to bolster the Democrats who are in those seats and find more potential House candidates? Right,
because as you know, in the Senate, now we've got more Democrats who are up for re-election
25 versus 9.
No,
yeah,
for
25 Dems up
a lot more vulnerability there. So that is going on. And I will also say one thing that's going on and at full force is looking at redistricting and what Eric Holder and former President Obama are doing. That organization is growing, and that's going to be very strong. And the Democrats finally realizing, hey, we've been losing the redistricting wars now for decades, and here's the effect on our states and our state offices. And that matters.
There was a lot of inspiration, I think, for young women across the country, too. I'm on the board of an organization called Running Start, and the amount of money that poured in since the election and since the past couple of weeks, because young women are saying, hey, our mothers and daughters and granddaughters are saying, you know what, let's get young women to get trained, to understand how to be involved and how to understand how to have an impact on their community, whether it's through public service or otherwise. So I'm inspired by the fact that there are young women who maybe 10 years from now will run because of what they saw over the past couple of weeks.
But as I understand it, millennial women, young millennial women, voters are more pro-life than prior generations.
But there's more issues than just that issue affecting women.
No, but I'm just saying, if we're talking about getting women to run for office who are pro-choice, who are pro, the cliche version of women's rights, are millennials going to be that?
I hope so. I mean, at least that's what I think. I mean, I think there's an opportunity there. But again, to the redistricting point, there's definitely going to be a dialogue about diverse opinions and diverse voices in Congress, more so than what we have right now in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
Here's what I think. anything that gets women more energized to take part in civil society makes it better for all of us. I am very excited that they've done anything to get women more involved.
And the march was great, and it was really well timed because we really needed to re-energize the space after, I mean, I didn't get out of bed for like 2 days after the election results. I mean, it was crushing. It was a crushing defeat, so we needed the march.
Well, I got out of bed, but but I do think it was great. I do think it was energizing, and I think it's good to point out this was not just about choice.
Right.
This march
Yes.
was not just
No,
about
of course
choice.
not. In fact, in many ways, it was so many issues, as Anne was talking about, that it was.
Immigration,
It's going to be hard to bring everybody together because a lot of marchers disagree with each other on
different things,
on Occupy Wall Street, on whatever it was. There were even pro-life feminists there. But anyway, let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay, at To the Contrary, from women's rights to women in the cabinet.
President Trump's initial cabinet will have more white males than any president since Ronald Reagan 35 years ago. If his nominees are confirmed, women and non-whites will hold 5 of 22 cabinet or cabinet-level positions. They are Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley, and Linda McMahon as Small Business Administrator. DeVos faces criticism for lacking experience and commitment to public education and a lack of support for public fundings to support federal policies, such as Title IX. She's also been an advocate for school choice, including expansion of charter schools and taxpayer-funded vouchers for private and religious schools. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, is in a senior role, but not cabinet level.
So, Anne,
Yes.
why are there so few women in the cabinet?
Well, they asked a lot and didn't get a lot in, but I think the only other 2 positions you might have gotten women in, especially, would have been Interior. Kathy McMorris Rodgers was under consideration, and at the last minute it tilted towards Zinke. We'll see how he does, and if Kathy doesn't end up there eventually. But I think
Was that her decision or the transition team's
I haven't
decision?
talked to her, so I can't tell you for sure. And I would only take it if I spoke with her. But she would have been terrific. Also, Mary Fallin. They looked at Governor Fallin for a position, and Marsha Blackburn was looked at for positions within the cabinet. Doesn't mean it won't happen. They won't come in later. His level of females actually is equal to George Bush the First. Is the last time they had that level. And I'd like to think that they went out and found the most quality people that could handle each issue that were willing to take the job. Well, sometimes it's hard to get women to take the job.
I'll tell you why there's so few women. Because he's a sexist, misogynist.
No, he is
yes,
not.
He is. And the one thing he is consistent with, the one thing he is consistent with, and I'll give this to Donald Trump, is he's about male white power and restoring
he isn't.
There's not enough women. He couldn't find enough qualified
women.
Say that. Maybe he should call Romney for his binders.
Well,
I did not say that at all.
But
the Romney book.
Right, yeah. Go ahead.
I did not say that at all.
I'm going to say, and really, all due respect, these are the same arguments that we've heard before. Oh, some of the women just don't want it. It's the most qualified person. Yeah. And that's how we've had white males. I just,
that is
we
so
have
offensive.
heard this
Okay,
over and over.
But wait a second. We have heard over and over and over, and having done the show for 25, there aren't enough qualified women. I have to say, it's a pretty new thing who would take the job. Right. And that doesn't speak very well of the administration.
Well, actually, yes, I was going to get to that point, too. Point well taken. Because it may be that there are a lot of women that don't want to be in this administration, considering this president and his history and things that he has said. So that could be that there are women
I have a friend who was a Green Republican. All 3 of them left in the country. But she was called not about EPA administrator, but deputy administrator. And she said, depends who it is. If it's somebody I can get along with, fine. If it's not, I wouldn't.
Well, I have to say this. To say Donald Trump, a man who has always hired as many women, if not more, in executive positions and pay them equally, unlike your person, Hillary Clinton, who had a very terrible history.
I'm really glad that he hired 2 women to run his construction firm in the 80s.
That is not true. We're talking throughout all of his organizations. He's always given
That's why he only found 4 women. Where's the proof?
They don't want to come into the administration.
You couldn't even name 3 women. Yeah, you couldn't even name 3 women that he's appointed.
Where's the proof that he's always consistently paid women? He's hired more women. Where's the document?
I would be happy to send you the articles in the backup.
The one article I read about a woman who worked for him and was high level up. Right. She said the men made more than we did, but they all had law degrees, and I didn't have a law degree. That's what she said.
Yeah, you've seen articles on her and about her and from her on both sides. She's been back and forth on whether or not it was a good thing. But there is a long history. I'd be happy, anybody out there that wants the information, be happy to send it to them.
I would also be eager to see the political appointees that are appointed that are not cabinet secretaries. Obviously, we're talking about a cabinet that actually pretty much mimics the Fortune 500 company's board of directors. If we're talking about this being the most important board of directors in America, you got 10% of women, or 10% boards that have 10% women sort of makeup in the United States. We're a little bit better than that for Donald Trump's cabinet. Now, it's not great. I'm not going to brag about it. I'm not going to say it's wonderful, but I will say that it operates on the standard that our corporations operate on right now, which we need to improve upon. And I think, again, President Obama and maybe President Clinton would have done something differently, but in the short term, I think we'll have to look and see who the political appointees are, because he already has a few of those that I think are really strong women that are not cabinet-level positions.
But I have an important question.
Sure.
Under Clinton was, I believe, the first time that they started releasing data on how many sub-cabinet personnel were women, Black, Asian, Latina, whatever, okay? Bush the second stopped that, okay? Obama reinstated it. Is there any way in the world you think that we will get those data from the Trump administration?
I think there's a good chance. And again, because Ivanka, yes, I know Saint Ivanka to you, is going to be pushing more and more, I think you probably will, because you're going to hear about a lot of successes she has. The interesting thing is there was a rumor that Trump was going to cut funding in the agencies for the women's programs. And I have been told not only that's not going to happen, but hell no, that's not going to happen. And in fact, Ivanka is very involved with the appointments to each of those positions. She intends to put together a force in government to really push hard. And I've said this before, I'll say it again.
To push against cuts, you mean?
To push against cuts and to push for improvements for women in policies that will benefit women and children, working mothers, women who are not working mothers, inside and outside the home.
But you know her paid work leave plan was widely panned by feminists and the left.
And that's a first draft, and you build from there. And judge her on performances, not anxiety over what the performance might be. Let's judge on what actually happens.
Then why did she say with her move to Washington that she was going to be just a daughter and resettle her family? Is she doing this secretly?
No, that's what she's doing initially. She has to get settled in. The office
and her
of
dad,
First Family.
wait, I do want to interject here. Her father did say, well, she's busy with the kids.
Right now,
that's what he said.
Right now.
It was not a very positive thing. It was not an empowering thing to say
it was
about
not the
his
first
daughter.
time that he's misstated something, and it won't be the last. But the point is, it's not going to be the Office of First Lady. It's the Office of First Family. She's very much engaged there. Dina Powell, who's wonderful, is going to be one of her chief point people in pushing this agenda forward. And I think you all are going to be very pleasantly surprised. And I don't know, 6 months, a year from now, you all are going to be saying, Anne, you were so right.
I can't wait.
Good.
Oh, boy.
Your response to that?
Wow, there's so much there.
Boy.
We are creating the Office of the First Family now.
Yeah.
So there's going to be an office there for the family members.
Like First Lady.
Like the First Lady.
Plus the daughter.
Yeah, well, to me, then, there needs to be a lot more scrutiny on the political families. Then,
I trust
if
there
that's
will
what
be.
they're going, if that's what's going to happen.
There already has been
ethical conflict
and probably
of
before
interests.
we elect them as president or Madam President.
I see.
I want to take a deep dive here for a second. If we could dig deeper ourselves, if we had the staff to, I would like to. But I would love DeVos, whose nomination is being held up a little bit. She was huge in Michigan in terms of setting up, taking public money, public school money, and diverting it to charter schools, many or most of which were Christian and private Christian academies. Does anybody know what their graduation rates were? How many of the girls who graduated from those schools got pregnant because there was abstinence-only education? What their female going to college rate was? How they did on the SAT scores?
I think those are wonderful questions. I don't have the answers here, but I know I have read of studies that have been done that showed the success rate was very high, and the kids did very well coming out of it.
These people went to Yale and Harvard?
But I haven't seen it broken out by gender. So that would be a very interesting question to ask. I'm more than happy to do that. I'll try to get you the information.
Thank you. Your thoughts? Or your thoughts, Jen?
Yeah,
no, sure, I'll take this.
You
That's
take
school
this
choice. No, I think there has been data, again, not specific to gender, but there has been data that supports the idea of school choice and the notion that there are better outcomes for students. Again, I'm separating out the fact that in some cases, Betsy DeVos's approaches in terms of religious schools in particular is disconcerting to a lot of folks. It makes me a little uncomfortable in terms of ideological implications of it, but overall school choice has a benefit to a lot of young people.
All right, thank you. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.